Week 11 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire this week. The first tight end, Tavion Sanders of the Carolina Panthers. I know he's going on bye in week 11 is Tavion Sanders, but the last couple weeks he's definitely emerged as a nice target in this offense with a couple trades of Deontay Johnson getting traded away, Jonathan Mingo getting traded away as well. Tavion Sanders taking over at that tight end spot for Tommy Trimble over the last couple weeks. So the last few games, week 7 at the Commanders, 6 catches, 61 yards. Week 8 at Denver, a catch, 7 yards. Week 9 versus Saints, 4 catches, 87 yards. And week 10 versus the Giants, I know only 2 catches, 8 yards. And he found the end zone and he was close to his second touchdown as well, is Tavion Sanders. So right now, him and Bryce Young are building a rapport. And this Carolina Panther team, believe it or not, they've won 2 in a row. And they're playing inspired football. So now going on bye week, we know rookies get into the playbook. They get more plays designed for them as well. And then coming out of it, tough matchups versus Kansas City, Tampa Bay, Philadelphia, where those are games they're most likely going to have to throw early and often. And I think Sanders can help fantasy owners. And I think he's going to get more expanded role in this offense, getting more targets. So right now, coming off some good ball games. And he's available in 97% of fantasy leagues. He's definitely a tight end. Ted this week, the next tight end, Mike Gesicki of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Mike Gesicki, he's been a good part of this offense over the last few weeks. And surprisingly, he's still out there in 55% of fantasy leagues. I know his numbers have been inflated, obviously, when T. Higgins has been out of the lineup, is Mike Gesicki. So the last few games for Gesicki, week 8 versus Philly, 7 catches, 73 yards, a fumble loss. Week 8 versus the Raiders, 5 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. And week 10 at Baltimore, 4 catches, 30 yards. But he had 9 targets. See if Higgins returns in this game at the Chargers on Sunday night in week 11. But I believe it's a possibility he sits out with the bye week in week 12. So Gesicki, he's a big target. He just needs reps, and because we've seen him bounce around with the Dolphins, with the Patriots, but I think he's found a home here as a tight end that can make plays, and him and Joe Burrow have a good rapport for the most part. So right now, well, he's surprisingly out there in 55% of fantasy leagues, and even if Higgins returns, I think he still could be a decent part of this offense. I would definitely give Gesicki an ad this week. Next ad, Zach Ertz of the Washington Commanders. To Zach Ertz, it's been a good season for him in his first year with Washington, and many people thought he was just going to be, a mentor and a guy who'd start early in the season, and then they were going to go to the backup. Ben Sinnott was his commander team, but obviously that hasn't been the case. Zach Ertz, for the most part, he's going to put up 7 or more fantasy points as a low ceiling for fantasy owners. And this commander team, they're playing great football and surprising football, obviously, this season on the year. 8-3 on the season, so the last few games for Zach Ertz. Week 8 versus Chicago, 7 catches, 77 yards, 11 targets. Week 9 at the Giants, a catch, 5 yards, an off game. And week 10 versus the Steelers in a shootout, 4 catches, 31 yards on 8 targets. So the targets have been there. He's the number 2 option in the passing game, no doubt about it, behind Terry McLaurin, when Noah Brown, Luke McCaffrey really haven't stepped up for this Commander team. And it's a quick turnaround here in week 11. His former teams, the Philadelphia Eagles, where he spent the majority of his career on Thursday night. So this could be a potential high-scoring game between these two NFC East rivals. And like I said, Thursday nights, usually anything goes, and it's high-scoring games. Zach Ertz, well, he's available in tons of fantasy leagues right now in 67%. He's definitely a tight end. Add off the wire this week, the next tight end, Will Disley, the Los Angeles Chargers. Will Disley, he's showed some flashes on and off this season. Number 1 tight end in this offense. In the last 3 out of 4 games, he's had 8 or more fantasy points in PPR leagues. Week 7 at the Cardinals, 8 catches, 81 yards. Week 8 versus the Saints, 5 catches, 41 yards. Week 9 at the Browns, 2 catches, 9 yards. And week 10 versus Tennessee, 5 catches, 30 yards, 6 targets. So this offense, obviously, Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnson, the top 2 options in the passing game. And then I would say Will Disley's that 3rd option in the passing game. So Will Disley, he can run the routes. He's got good hands. We've seen flashes from him, obviously, going back to the Seattle Seahawks days. But right now, he's actually making some waves and could be a fantasy option in deeper leagues. Available in 98% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final tight end I have as an ad this week's Dawson Knox of the Buffalo Bills. So Dawson Knox, he's available in 99% of fantasy leagues. And we know Dalton Kincaid, he got hurt in this ball game with the knee. He returned a little bit, and then he went out, and he was out for good. So Kincaid, he didn't feel confident he could go out there and protect the knee on taking hits, and that could be definitely a concern going into the week. So we know Dawson Knox, he had a big season a few years ago with this Buffalo Bill team. And believe it or not, as the number 2 tight end, the last 2 out of 3 weeks, he's had 6 or more fantasy points in PPR leagues. Week 8 at Seattle, 2 catches, 50 yards. Week 9 versus Miami, a catch, 5 yards. And Week 10 in Indianapolis, 2 catches, 40 yards. So this week, good matchup versus Chiefs on paper. Give up the second most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So if Kincaid has to miss some time, which I think he will miss this game, and then maybe after the bye week in Week 12 he returns as Dalton Kincaid. I think Dawson Knox, he could be a decent add for fantasy owners, and we know he's got the rapport with Josh Allen, and we knew he had a big season a few years ago as well with Josh Allen. So that's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire for Week 11 of the fantasy football season.